piece. Like I think of these frames a lot like ideograms as well, like putting different information together in one composition.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to think about it, because they sort of, you know, they still sort of have their separateness to them, you know, and even if you have these both individually, you know, they would be interesting photographs on their own and beautiful, but sort of putting them together and creating this diagrammatic frame around it really sort of adds to the interconnectedness of these two images, I think.
Yes, and yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. If you wanted to say something, please feel free.
I was just thinking that it's like they are connected and disconnected, and I was the skin and the old, and one contains the other inside it, like the old and the new. One exists inside the other, the past and the future.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And there's something, yeah, there's something about that kind of like melding. You know, it's funny that I think about this. One of like my favorite childhood books was The Secret Garden, and there's, you know, the older film of The Secret Garden. You know, the young girl tells her cousin this story that, you know, she heard when she was growing up in India about this boy that had the entire universe like inside of him. And it's sort of, when I look at that piece, I kind of think about that story, because there's something about that connection between that, you know, that sort of like the future and the past, kind of, you know, that we sort of carry that with us, like it's embedded in our bodies, you know, and
That's
I don't know, there's something
nice.
that reminds me of that, for sure. So, okay. So along the lines of when you're walking into the gallery, you see that first piece, but then you can turn basically right around and you're confronted by these two works here. And these are actually works that are on flat screen monitors that that Maria built. We have these frames built around specifically for. So Maria, do you want to talk a little bit about this idea of the infinite loop and the movement that's sort of happening here with these works?
Yes. These works exist. The first time you saw them, they were printed and presented in frames.
Here they are.
Exactly, here they are. And these were also the first works that I created with these structural frames. I was working with this idea of photomontage, and I was looking at these archival images from the American School of Classical Studies in Athens. I had worked with archival images before when I was doing work with NASA in the past, so I really like archives, and I used some of these for the photomontages. And then I put them together then I created this composition and presented them as still images. When we started talking about the show, I thought I would show them again as animated frames. I have been doing this in my work since the beginning. I have been using photography, still photography, presented as printed images, but also making moving images with still photographs. And it's very interesting to me, the difference that the difference how a viewer sees a still image and how a viewer sees a moving image. Because when you look at a still photograph, you wonder what happened in the photograph. So immediately you think about a past event. But when you look at a moving image, immediately you think it's like a feeling of anticipation, like what is gonna happen next. And this is like an effect that I have always used because it's still images that are moving. So you are kind of in between. But in these animations, which are not exactly videos, they're more short loops of time repeating themselves ad infinitum, in these animations, it's moving, but it's trapped in a specific moment. And I like to think as this loop, this repetition, as the strangeness of the digital time that we experience, where everything kind of exists in the present. All the information we receive, all the images that we see on our screens, we lose the sense of time. And I think of these animations as trapped in this present endless moment.
I think that's a really interesting way to put it, because it does feel like, especially now with all of this, in terms of, being so virtual and learning from home and working from home and sort of being on the, trapped in your computer in a way. I feel like it sort of gives you, there's sort of like a little bit of anxiety inducement, but at the same time, it feels totally like necessary. And if they were still, or all of them, right? Because we have a variety of still images like we just saw in the show, as well as these infinite loops. And so it sort of like gives this kind of heartbeat in a way to the show. But yeah, it gives you this kind of feeling like, oh, there's something happening here, but I can't quite you can't really like get past it, right? Because it just sort of is kind of stuck in this continual loop.
Yeah. I think they feel like they're technically alive. Mm-hmm. They're very, even though they're almost ruins, like faces of youth or humans with ruins, they feel very like cyborg bodies, mm-hmm. bodies that exist in digital spaces. And this movement, I wanted to, I like the feeling of it, mm-hmm. of creating this technical breath, or like being kind of machine-like.
Yeah, there is something, really specific, especially with the ones that are sort of montaged with the rock. So, right, there is this kind of cyborg-esque, but it's kind of like an ancient cyborg, right? It's like thinking about if these, beautiful sculptures that that we have seen at the Met, or that you see in Athens, or, all over the world, are sort of like coming alive again, in a way that, of course we've seen, movies where people are turned into sculptures, right? And sort of references that like they're, there is a life, right? There is a life that kind of is within that. And then there's, work like this, which doesn't really have any of that alteration. It's really just the, the body framed in, within obviously the frame that you've created, but separate images kind of put together. This one is also something, one that really like stands out to me in the show, because this sort of melding of your body with your son's body. And, especially as a mom, like really thinking about how, once you have a child, your body is never your own anymore, right? It always belongs to them in some way. And so this piece, with the way that you've sort of set it up, it just sort of like echoes it with this kind of, coming together of the two people, I think. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about working with your family and, what that's sort of like, and the process that you do with that, photographing your family.
This piece is, there are two pieces with very similar, it's this piece and another piece that are titled Puzzlers. And indeed, they're very puzzling pieces, because they're made very instinctively. It is, I was thinking a lot about instinct. Also, working with my family and my children was an instinctive move. Suddenly, instead of looking at the world around me, I started taking pictures of these bodies that, are they live with me, they're part of me. And I was thinking a lot about, at that time, I was thinking again about ancient Greek mythology. And this god Pan, the god of wilderness, who is half human and half animal, and he's the god of panic and nightmares. And I was thinking how when you have children and they grow up and you look at them and you see your past self in them, and then you see yourself you see them and yourself in the future when you look at them. It's a very strange reflection what you see when you look at them. And it also has inside this element of future and past, and how they exist inside me and inside them. Like I am the past and he's the future, but he's also the past and I am also the future. It's like they all come together in a way. Also, again, in this way of thinking about my work through information technology and this angle of looking at this prism of looking at my work, I am thinking about instinct a lot, because I feel like technology is capable of understanding all our gestures and our language and our desires, and to predict whatever we want or whatever we need. But the only thing that, while we don't understand the technology we have created at the depth that our technology understands us, so I'm thinking that instinct is, and living and creating instinctively, it's the only way that technology cannot predict our moves and cannot control us in a way. So yes, I think this is how I feel about this piece.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, because I was listening to the radio yesterday, and there was a story about this photojournalist, but it, just thinking about the act of photography, they're talking about, obviously, it's a very different thing than painting, right? So painting, you're sort of sitting with that moment over and over and over again, whereas photography, you're trying to capture that, that very specific moment with the light and the framing and sort of all of these things. And of course, now with digital photography, it's a different thing, but you don't shoot digitally, and so, it really has, like, instinct, I think, comes into play a lot with just the process of photography too, of sort of, they always talk about having that eye, right? That kind of way. But I think that kind of comes across too in sort of looking at some of these works where you're capturing that moment exactly the way that, you want it to be.
Yes. This is a great observation, and the connection you're making between instinct and film photography. It's true, because you cannot control the outcome, and you don't know what you shot until you do all the process and you process the film. And and it's so unexpected, the outcome. And there is this magic involved in it as well. The chemistry and the absolute darkness and then the light. So yes, I choose to shoot film photography because I feel like everything is moving very fast, and with information and again technology. And this is my way of taking my time, because for me it takes a lot of time to make work, to think about work. And this ritual of shooting and developing, it keeps me connected to the way I understand and I want to process the information, versus everything that happens around me that is moving so fast.
Yeah, I think that's it does sort of give you a way to be grounded. And I love that you mentioned that magic, because I do think that's such an important part. I also went for my undergrad in photography back before the digital camera craze, and when there still was a color darkroom processor and all of these things. And so, there was always that, like, oh, I don't know, I hope it turned out, but I have no idea what this is going to look like. And that is something that I think is really specific to photography, and obviously specific to photographing on film, or even, I guess, filming on film still, because people still do that. But yeah, not having that instant, oh, it's not exactly what I want, like, let's do it again and again and again until you get it. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go with it. I had my chance. And I think that is,
and
it makes it so fun too.
Definitely. And also it is it is the texture of the film that it makes it very unique and very precious, especially when you see it on these high definition monitors, because even though you may not understand it, I think that the eye feels the depth of the analog, even though there is something different to it. And people talk about 4K and 5K and all sorts of image quality, but nothing compares to the quality of film.
I agree with you. Here are some more images of this series here.
Yes. The one on the left is titled Self Stranger, and it is a self-portrait, the first self-portrait I ever made. I started working with my children, and then I realized that taking pictures of my children was the closest to a self-portrait. And then I thought maybe I should turn the camera to myself and start making or make a work with myself. And in this piece, I was thinking how we live in all these very complicated systems, and how every time I am on the internet and I browse several websites, or go online, wherever, and I make all these choices, or look something online and put all these parts of myself out there, but just by browsing, let's say. Then there is something behind the screen, some data companies that collect all my data and all the information I leave behind, and then they reconstruct it, and they put it together, and they create these strange readings of myself, which, I don't know, they belong to some data banks. And this is a personal anxiety, and I think of it all the time. Then this piece is a lot about that, and that's how the title came along, Self Stranger. It's like, what do they see and what do they take of me?
Yeah, I think that's, I didn't know that this was your first self-portrait. So just in thinking about that is really interesting to, finally turn the camera on yourself. And that's obviously like a really hard thing, I think, to do, especially when you've been so even focus on your family is one thing, but just in general, putting yourself out there, or examining yourself that way. But yeah, also this sort of this culture that we live in of this, mining everything that we do and following our tracks, and where is that going? I think that there was this, I don't know if people saw that documentary that was about the social network stuff, but I can't remember what it was called now.
Social network.
Yeah, but they have these 3 people in this weird room, pulling all of these things and putting all of these things out into the
social dilemma. Yes.
The social dilemma, that's what it was. And ever since then, I've been really thinking about that, and sort of the tracks that I've left, right, are changing everything about what then I see in the future. And it's really, really kind of creepy. But we did have a question I was gonna, since we're sort of talking about photography, what camera and lens do you use?
I use 2 cameras, and actually I use 3 cameras. And one is a pocket camera, a Leica pocket camera. And I use that one because it has a timer. So I can easily use it on my save. And then I use my main camera is an M6 Leica with a 50mm lens. And then I have another camera that I use, which I also used on the piece, which is on the screen next to Save Stranger, which is an R7 Leica with a 100mm lens. So yes, these are my 3 cameras.
Okay, here is another shot of the exhibition. And what I was maybe thinking about talking about now is really just, the rubric that I've sort of worked these 3 exhibitions under is intimate actions, and sort of thinking about, now that people have sort of seen a gamut of the work, I don't know, talking about what that means. And I think we were kind of doing that a little bit with the self-portrait, but like, and obviously it's been a very, the past 9 months, 10 months, I don't even know where we are with this, with the COVID world, but, we're all sort of experiencing a different type of intimacy now, whether that's obviously spending more time with, by yourself or your immediate family more than you normally would, or with obviously like your computer and your work in a different way. So I was just curious if you wanted to speak to like your personal experience with intimacy, and thinking about these images that you have, that we're showing here.
Yes, well, a lot of this work was made during the time that we were, home during the first wave of the pandemic. So it was a lot of, bodies walking around on screens and, holding screens, communicating through screens. So there was a lot of bodies and screens which also translate into frames. So this is one aspect of it. But then it is very interesting to me the fact that how intimacy works through technology, and how technology is I don't know exactly how to say it, but intimacy is about closeness, and technology is about distance, and how technology facilitates, which is all about distance, facilitates the closeness that makes, brings up intimacy. So how we become more intimate through the distance of technology. I think it has to do a lot with what we get to, we can choose what to show and what to hide of ourselves. And this is, it's much easier to become, to, show aspects that otherwise we wouldn't if we were in close contact with somebody.
Yeah.
Also, I think I kind of mentioned it before. I like very much how the skin feels so different when you see it through the screen. It feels like in these cyborg bodies, which I also mentioned before, it feels like it is a layer or a clothing. It's not a real skin, which is also very interesting to me when you see something so intimate like somebody's body, through a screen. Yes, so.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's something that really like, I don't know, like it has a very different feel. And I think what I really love about these works is that closeness, right? Is sort of getting, being able to be like so close up to some of these like very intimate parts of the body that you normally like, I wouldn't see that just sort of walking down the street, or even being in your house necessarily for like dinner or something like that, or a studio visit. And so you know, these kind of like details that, you know, instead of sort of showing the whole body, there's these really intricate, like small details that are then, you know, blown up large. I think there's a question about how big some of these are. And, you know, some of the monitors, they range between like 40 inches to, I think our largest one is like 60 inches maybe. The prints are, you know, are varied in terms of the sizes of them, which of course I can't remember off the top of my head. Maybe Maria knows some of the sizes of the prints. But, you know, there are some that are smaller and some that are larger, and the scale shifting, I think, is also really important in terms of looking at, you know, being able to sort of see different things in different parts.
I don't remember the sizes of the prints, but I think in these works, it's very interesting the fact that they are also in black and white. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking the other day that a lot of electronic devices have this silver gray color as well. And I was thinking about the work, you know, these framed, you know, pictures images that have all this beautiful grain and the skin, and how they resemble all these electronic devices that were, you know, that come to us from the 70s and the 80s, and they all have this beautiful gray texture and gray color. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, I don't know if I also see them or feel or imagine them as this, because I do think of my animated works as electronic sculptures. Mm. So I was thinking the relation with, you know, the stereos, you know what I mean? They're these really, you know, geometric stereo surfaces. Mm-hmm. That sometimes you touch them and they're not completely, they have this kind of texture that resembles grain in a way. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was thinking about the relation with those.
Yeah, I think that's that's kind of interesting. I hadn't been thinking about that, but yeah, I definitely you know, speaking to the black and white, which is very much, you know, you've worked in black and white photography for a long time, and it's sort of interesting that also Joey's show, which people would walk through right before hitting your show, is also in black and white, and sort of thinking about the relationship there, and again, like this sort of idea of like the past, you know, and the sort of like vintageness of black and white photography too, and you know,
yes, and it's also they feel so theatrical as well, like these bodies moving, and you don't really see the faces. Sometimes they're still, sometimes they're moving, but it is very theatrical. I mean, I haven't been in the show, but the way I came to see the space before the show, before we set up the show, but now that I see the install images, this is what comes to mind, that it would be an incredible experience to walk in the space and be in contact with these, you know, bodies that are moving, and they are a little bit scary in a way. They are a little bit mechanical. They have this, you know, technical life to them.
Yeah.
And it's like they live in these machines. It's like these bodies exist inside those systems, and they try to communicate with us. It's like they were out of the systems and now they're inside the systems, and they resemble, you know, these electronic devices. And I think they look a little, they look strange.
They do, but there's something also like, so like they really they really draw you in, you know, the screens do, I think. And I'm showing images of install images of both when the space is kind of darkened and some when it's more bright, because we kind of wanted to just sort of see what it felt like. And we've now, if you come to see the show, it is a little bit darker in there, and they really draw you through which I think is really important as sort of you're walking through the space. There was a question about how do you decide, so Jared Ledesma said, I see a connection between intimacy and the 2 or 3 panels or screen combinations and their proximity to one another. Maria, how do you decide the configurations your objects end up in?
I want them to be close enough, but not really connecting, so you can feel the disconnection. And I want the viewer to wonder what happened and what is missing there and why is it missing. It's like this rupture that you also see in ruins sometimes, that you see ruins and one is over there and one is a little bit further away, and you kind of try to reconstruct them in your mind. Mm-hmm. So I want them close, but far enough so you have this question like, oh, why, or what happened there? Why they're not, together completely? Mm-hmm. Why they don't touch each other?
Yeah, I think that I also sort of, as the curator of these 3 shows, and really looking at each of your works, there is this like fracturing of the body that happens, right? This sort of like mystery of, especially with your work and with Paul's work in terms of, not showing everything, right? And really kind of keeping things behind like a closed door, just not giving all the information and sort of, but then kind of morphing things together. And I think that, especially this one that's on the back wall, showing the back and then the front legs and sort of, kind of creating these, sort of like robot-esque bodies within like, the larger systems that are happening. It's really interesting to kind of see like how you decide to put things together, like similar to, Jared's question of just like, are you photographing a lot and then sort of putting things together? Are you going into things like with, you said you're very instinctual, but I don't know, like, are you setting it up in your head first, or do you find it afterwards?
I don't photograph a lot. I photograph very little. From each film, I make approximately 2 works, which is a lot, I think. I don't, sometimes I have a small idea, but it always ends up being something else. So I start with something, and then, the film has like 36 shots. So I shoot approximately, 20 different angles. And then in 5 different positions or something. Depends on the light, depends on the mood. And then I create all this, I have all these images, I create this archive of images. And then when I'm in the right mood, I look at them, and, after I develop them and I dry them and I scan them, it's like, it takes a very long time.
Yeah.
And then I look at them and I come up with these compositions on paper or, on the computer. And then I live with them for a while and see how they feel after a few days. And then I decide what I want to do with them. Mm-hmm. If I want to print them or animate them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just curious if maybe you can, going back to the beginning of the talk, we showed those images that I had seen in Miami of the first framed works that you did. I'm just wondering, like, what sort of spurred working in this way with these frames? Like, was there something that kind of like happened in the studio that you all of a sudden were like, "Ooh, I want to do this"?
It was a continuation, because I had this studio at the Pioneer Works when we met, and they had all this equipment that they gave to me. They said, "Oh, you can use this, you can use these monitors and this and this." And I started making these animations with certain images, and then I was putting the monitors together, and I really liked it. And I did present 2 monitors next to each other in that show. And then the show ended, and I continued taking pictures. And I was thinking what I was going to show at NADA, and I had made these 2 photo montages. And I was looking at them, and I was thinking this would be so interesting together, close to each other. And that's how it happened. I just drew a mental line between the 2 pieces supporting each other, and that was it. But before all of this happened, I was already making video sculptures and photographic sculptures and installations that were all very anthropomorphic. So it wasn't just putting the pictures together.
Right.
I was already in that mindset of making anthropomorphic work.
Yeah, and people can see images of your previous work on your website, and the shows, the Pioneer Work show, as well as the show that you had in Austin at UT, which I think was also sort of, moving in this direction for sure. So we had another question about just influences, favorite photographers that you look at. So I don't know if there's anyone that comes to mind.
When I started making this work and working specifically with bodies, I started looking at the work of Francesca Gutmann, which is she's a photographer who was working with her body a lot, with herself, making mostly self portraits, not portraits, but of her body, haunting work. This was an incredible influence on me. And other than that, I like very much the photography of Man Ray. Also others from different type of photography. I've always, since day one, have been looking at street photography, like Gary Winogrand and Diane Arbus a lot. But photography is not the only art that inspires me. I am an incredible cinephile. I watch films all the time. I also try to read and read poetry a lot, listen to, like, all art forms interest me.
Yeah. I think it's really, really great to be able to, pull influences from obviously all different types of cultural influences, as well as technology, as well as science. All of those sort of things do, I think, fit really nicely within your work. I had just thought of something and now I've forgotten it, and I'm really mad at myself. I was going to say something, but I'm just kind of going through the last few images here. And thanks, Jared, for sharing those links in the chat of Maria's work. Oh man, it's at the tip of my tongue. Oh, well, it'll come back. This is,
this piece is titled Forever Rock, and it is the raptures of the rock come from a bust, a statue that is in the Metropolitan Museum again. It's a Roman statue, and the body is my son's body. And I think I like this piece a lot, as all the pieces that I do that have to do with ruins, because for me, I spoke about it before. It's the raptures, it's the reconstructions, and it makes me. I connect it to this current state, the cyborg state that we experience, because I feel like we're all like bits of data that were somehow coming together in this digital world. And I connected with these ruins.
Yeah, I think that there's, something about thinking about, who and what came before us, and sort of being able to continue to like pull that thread through to, through to like the present and the future. This piece also just makes me, sort of makes my like heart ache in a good way, because it kind of feels like, to me, like this sort of captures like how I've been feeling a lot lately, like just emotionally. I think like with, this past year of just what feels like these kind of like, like ruptures that have, happened. But there's something about this piece that also is like very hopeful, because it just like feels like, okay, this is what it is, but it's not always going to, it's not always going to be like this, and it's good to have sort of scars, right? It's good to have like those memories, and to sort of think about our past, so that we can like move forward in terms of, maybe correcting what we need to do, or just remembering the, the things that have made us like a stronger person or a stronger community or country or, whatever. So.
I also think of I use these statues and this material, the rock, because I think of it as it was the first technology that we created, and it is still so relevant in the technology that we use now, because we mine all the materials for the electronic devices. So the stone is always present, it's always there, from the beginning till now. And also something else to emphasize to what you were saying is that, which is a very interesting thought and image, is that the ancients also thought of themselves as contemporaries, which makes one, wonder our relationship with time.
You cut out there for a second. Could you speak for a second, Maria? I don't know if your volume is working.
Hi.
Okay, there it goes. We just had a comment that said, or kind of question to everybody, from Alexandra, that says, does this speak to anyone else in terms of being trapped in technology, how far we have gone and how long we have been trapped, like how these images continuously move in a way that seems like they are longing to break free from the frames? I thought it was an interesting comment to read.
That's beautiful.
And then this is just the last slide that we have, which is the video that's in our video room, which is a longer video. And I'm gonna just show a short portion of it, and then we maybe have time for one or two other questions. So if anyone has questions, let me open this up real quick. And did you want to say something, Maria?
Yes, there is you cannot see the video, or I cannot see the video, it's only the sound.
We do not see the video. I'm so sorry, everyone. Hold on one second. I do not know why that's happening. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second, reshare. I apologize. Here we go. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna circle back and make it full screen. Okay. I'm gonna stop it there. I'm gonna go back. I love this one shot right here. It just there's something about those hands. But do you want to talk about the sound in this? Because I feel like that I love the sound, and something that really resonates with me.
Okay, first of all, this is titled Stone People. And I used stones and bodies and ruins. So I had a show in Austin, Texas at the Visual Arts Center at the University of Texas in Austin. And we created these installations with using stones from local quarries. And the gallery had this amazing echo. And when we were moving the stones and installing them, they were making this beautiful, beautiful sound. So we recorded them, and then I used them when I made this piece. So this is where the sound comes from another installation, which was not meant to be a sound installation.
Right. I love how the unplannedness sometimes really generates like the best, and it just really works with this work and the movement, through the bodies turning to stone. The images
Yes.
of the stone, that especially that one with your son in the bed. I'm just gonna right here. I love this. This is like one of my most favorite like parts of it, is sort of as him turning into that, or vice versa, I guess you could say.
Because I was thinking that the only way that technical cameras and technology cannot detect you is when you have no temperature and you don't move. And when you become one, like a rock, no, you freeze and you become like a rock or like a statue. Because we always generate data and we always generate information. So the idea is not to hide or to conceal or to become invisible to technology. And this is how I made this piece. And also I was thinking that we are all ruins in progress, which is an idea of American artist Robert Smithson. He did a lot of work with quarries in the proximity of New York and land. And I think after this piece, this video piece, I have started to make more work with nature and bodies and nature, and thinking a little bit about ideas of ecofeminism and women body and nature. So this video, it was like the beginning for something else.
Interesting. Well, I think that might be time, but if anyone has a last question, feel free to chat it in. If not, I just want to thank you so much, Maria, for this.
Thank you
for sharing your thoughts and your work with us and the Omaha community. And just a reminder to everyone that the shows are open until April 24th, so plenty of time and to come see them. And we'll do more programming. And as I said, we're doing a conversation with Paul Mapagi Sepoya next week at this time at noon. So please join us for that. And yeah, thank you so much, Maria, again. And thanks to everyone at Bemis, all the staff that helps get this program together, and all of the attendees. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone have a wonderful rest of your week. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.